The Soviet Union. For 74 years it stood as a giant on the world stage, forged in revolution, promising a new world for workers and peasants. A story of breathtaking ambition and profound tragedy. It defeated Nazism, launched humanity into space. More than a country, it was an idea, an ideology to upend the old order. Its rise and fall defined an era. This is the story of the Soviet Union. Before the red flag flew over the Kremlin, there was Tsarist Russia, an empire vast and ancient, ruled by an autocrat, Tsar Nicholas II. A land of deep faith and profound inequality. Peasants toiled in near serfdom. Workers in burgeoning cities faced brutal conditions. Discontent simmered beneath the surface. Whispers of change grew louder. The Russo-Japanese War of 1905 had exposed the regime's weakness. Revolutionaries, inspired by Karl Marx, plotted in exile and in secret. They dreamed of a world without masters. Then came the Great War, in 1914. Russia joined with patriotic fervor, but the war bled the nation dry. Millions died at the front. Hunger stalked the cities. The Tsar's authority crumbled. In February 1917, the people of Petrograd rose up. Soldiers mutinied. The Tsar abdicated. A provisional government took power, but it was weak. It could not solve the nation's deep crises. It continued the hated war. The people yearned for something more. Into this chaos stepped Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, known as Lenin, a brilliant, ruthless revolutionary. He returned to Russia in April 1917. His message was simple and powerful: peace, land, and bread. On October 25, 1917, by the old calendar, the Bolsheviks struck. Lenin proclaimed a Soviet government. The Bolsheviks held Petrograd and Moscow, but their grip on the vast Russian land was fragile. Enemies rose from every corner: Tsarist loyalists, the Whites, disaffected socialists, foreign powers, alarmed by the communist revolution. Britain, France, Japan, and the United States sent troops. They aimed to strangle the infant Soviet state in its cradle. A brutal civil war erupted in 1918. It would last for nearly 5 years. It would tear the country apart. Brother fought brother. Lenin's government implemented war communism, a desperate set of policies. Grain was forcibly requisitioned from peasants, industries were nationalized, private trade was banned, labor was militarized. These measures kept the Red Army supplied, but they devastated the economy. Famine swept the land, peasant uprisings flared. The Kronstadt naval base, once a bastion of the revolution, rebelled in 1921. The Red Army, forged by Leon Trotsky, ultimately prevailed. The Whites were defeated. Foreign interventionists withdrew, but Russia was in ruins. Millions had perished in war, famine, and disease. In December 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, was proclaimed. After Lenin's death, a power struggle ensued. Joseph Stalin, the man of steel, proved the most cunning. He outmaneuvered his rivals, including the brilliant Trotsky. By the late 1920s, Stalin was the undisputed master of the Soviet Union. He envisioned a different path from Lenin's NEP. He sought to transform the USSR into a mighty industrial power, to catch up with the West, to build socialism in one country. This ambition would come at a terrible human cost. In 1928, Stalin launched the first 5-year plan, a crash program of industrialization. New cities, factories, and dams rose from the earth. Workers were driven relentlessly. Propaganda hailed their heroic efforts. Simultaneously, Stalin ordered the collectivization of agriculture. Millions of individual peasant farms were forced into large, state-controlled collective farms. The goal was to increase grain production, to feed the cities, to fund industrialization. But the peasants resisted fiercely. The consequences were catastrophic. Agricultural output plummeted. A man-made famine, the Holodomor, devastated Ukraine and other regions in 1932-33. Millions starved to death. Those who resisted collectivization, the kulaks, were branded enemies of the people. They were arrested, deported, or executed, yet industrial output soared. Section 5. The Great Patriotic War: Sacrifice and Victory. While Stalin consolidated his power and forged an industrial state, a new threat gathered in the West: Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Germany. In August 1939, the world was stunned. The Soviet Union and Nazi Germany signed a non-aggression pact. They secretly agreed to divide Eastern Europe between them. Stalin hoped to buy time, to prepare for an inevitable conflict, but Hitler had other plans. On June 22, 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive surprise invasion of the Soviet Union. 3 million German soldiers poured across the border. The Red Army, weakened by Stalin's purges, was caught unprepared. Initial losses were staggering. Millions of Soviet soldiers were killed or captured. German forces advanced rapidly. They laid siege to Leningrad. They reached the outskirts of Moscow. It seemed the Soviet Union might collapse, but the Soviet people rallied. This was not just a war between armies, it became the Great Patriotic War. A struggle for national survival. Stalin, despite his earlier blunders, became a symbol of defiance. Industries were evacuated eastward beyond the Urals. Partisans waged a brutal guerrilla war behind enemy lines. Ordinary citizens endured unimaginable hardship. The tide began to turn in the winter of 1942 to 43. Section 6, Cold War Confrontation, A World Divided. Victory in 1945 brought pride. It brought relief, but it did not bring lasting peace. The wartime alliance between the Soviet Union and the Western powers fractured. Deep ideological differences resurfaced. Winston Churchill spoke of an iron curtain descending across Europe. The Soviet Union consolidated its control over Eastern European nations. The United States resolved to contain Soviet expansion. The Cold War had begun. Section 7, The Brezhnev Stagnation Cracks in the Monolith. After the ouster of Nikita Khrushchev in 1964, Leonid Brezhnev rose to power. His era, lasting nearly 2 decades, was one of apparent stability, of developed socialism, as the official doctrine proclaimed. The Soviet Union achieved rough nuclear parity with the United States. Its influence in the developing world grew. For many ordinary citizens, life improved. There was job security, access to basic education and healthcare, a sense of predictability. But beneath the calm surface, deep problems festered. The system was slowly grinding to a halt. The Soviet economy, centrally planned and rigidly controlled, struggled to adapt. It excelled at producing tanks and steel, but it failed to provide quality consumer goods. Shortages were common. Long lines for basic necessities became a symbol of the era. Innovation stagnated. Corruption spread. A vast black market thrived. The ruling elite, a gerontocracy of aging men, seemed resistant to change. They clung to power. They mouthed old slogans, but the revolutionary zeal was gone, replaced by cynicism and apathy. Dissent, though often brutally suppressed, persisted. Section 8, Gorbachev's Gamble, Glasnost, and Perestroika. Leonid Brezhnev died in 1982. He was followed by 2 more elderly ailing leaders, Yuri Andropov and Konstantin Chernenko. Both died within a short time. The Soviet system seemed frozen, paralyzed. Then, in March 1985, a new, younger leader emerged, Mikhail Gorbachev. He was 54 years old, energetic, articulate. He understood that the Soviet Union was in crisis. He believed it could be reformed, revitalized. He launched 2 bold initiatives, Glasnost and Perestroika. Glasnost meant openness. Gorbachev eased censorship. He encouraged public discussion of the nation's problems. Long-suppressed truths began to emerge: the crimes of Stalin, the inefficiencies of the economy, the environmental disasters. Books were published, films were released, political prisoners were freed. For the first time in decades, Soviet citizens could speak more freely, debate more openly. It was a breath of fresh air, a moment of exhilarating change, but it also unleashed forces that Gorbachev could not control. Section 9, The Fall of an Empire, Legacy and Echoes. The year 1989 was a watershed. The Berlin Wall fell. One by one, the communist regimes of Eastern Europe crumbled. The Soviet Union, under Gorbachev, did not intervene. The Brezhnev Doctrine, which asserted Moscow's right to crush dissent in its satellite states, was dead. This restraint was praised in the West, but it emboldened nationalist movements within the USSR itself. The empire was fraying at the edges, and then at its core. Republics declared sovereignty. They challenged Moscow's authority. The hardliners in the Communist Party watched with alarm. They saw Gorbachev's reforms as a betrayal, as a path to ruin. In August 1991, they launched a coup. Gorbachev was placed under house arrest, tanks rolled into Moscow, but the coup was poorly organized. It was met with popular resistance. Boris Yeltsin, the charismatic president of the Russian Republic, climbed atop a tank. He defied the plotters. The coup collapsed within days.